an incredible panel up next. And so I'd like to start welcoming our panelists to the floor, beginning with Christina Perla, who will be moderating this session. And Christina, I'll bring your panelists up. They're yours to introduce. Welcome to the stage.
Thanks, Sarah, for the handoff. I'll just wait for everybody to come on up. But I guess we can get started. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Christina Perla. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Makelab. We are a service bureau. Hold on one second. I'm getting some feedback. Could you guys mute temporarily? Oh, odd. Okay. All right. So I am the co-founder and CEO of Makelab. We're a service bureau over on the East Coast, specifically New York, more specifically Brooklyn, represent. This whole thing was founded by my husband and I. We're both co-founders. We started out as freelancers doing design work, like industrial design and product design development. Then we decided to add some 3D printers to the mix to supplement our income because design is tough. And so about 2 years into it, it pretty much took over. We had no time for design, and we 3x'd our income that year, and we decided to go Makelab full time. And ever since then, we've been building, and a big part of our focus is heavily people focused. We have huge DEI initiatives. My husband and I, we are both actually immigrants. We are BIPOC. That is very rare in this industry, and we want to use our reach as a company to inspire more like DEI across the entire industry. And something else is we're really just gender equity focus as well. And so these are two very important things to us. So this panel is super fitting, and I'm a true believer that culture has everything to do with how companies grow and scale, and how they don't eventually they maintain as healthy, stable companies. And so I've always believed that culture is a really important but overlooked part of building a company and maintaining a company. And so today we are here to talk through all of our experiences, as all of us have a focus on this in our own careers. So I'll hand it all over to you guys. I'm going to mute myself, and if you guys can introduce yourself.
All right, I guess I'll jump in first since I hit unmute. Toolbox Created. My husband, we started it twice. Design companies, Colorado, and we tech in the early edition of Fort Collins being a lot of people don't know creators here. There's that our method of design thinking, folks who have these really design staff are all illustrators, trying to show people that can be really effective when it comes to these complex. And I have been putting in technology.
Hey, sorry, you have a lot of feedback that we did not have prior to this call. Could I ask you to refresh your page? Okay, all right.
Okay.
Jeannine, would you like to introduce yourself in the meantime?
Sure, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Hello, my name is Jeannine Kunz, and I am the Vice President of our Training and Development Group at SME. Some of you may know SME as a Society of Manufacturing Engineers, a 90-plus-year-old nonprofit. Actually, we're celebrating our 90th year this year, actually, now that I say it. I've been with the organization for 21 years and proudly leading the group that is all about people. So it's all about talent management, people management, workforce development, all those different ways of referring to the good aspects of individuals within an organization, what make up the fabric of the smallest employers to the largest. We're focused inside of manufacturing, all different verticals, and certainly 3D printing that area. But we could be working on things from welding to machining to, as we mentioned, 3D printing. We also get the opportunity to work inside schools. So while we're talking about culture and inside of organizations, I'd be remiss though if I didn't talk about the important work that we get the privilege of doing inside of schools, from high schools, community colleges, and universities, building up individuals as they enter the workforce. And I mention it because later, I think as we talk in the panel, there's aspects when we think about young people who leave a school and enter the workforce and the critical nature that culture plays, right? Sometimes maybe a shock to some systems of young people as they enter organizations. So looking forward to the conversation along with my colleagues here on the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannine. Maryna, you want to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Maryna Ienina. I am Academy Product and Partnership Manager with EOS. EOS is leading provider of industrial metal and polymer powder bed fusion systems on the market. And it is family-owned company, and it was founded over 30 years ago by Dr. Hans Langer, and now his daughter, Marie Langer, is leading the company. And while providing reliable additive manufacturing system, processes, and services is critical, this does not complete the loop. There is also one important link, that is education. So about 6 years ago, we formed a new team, that is Additive Minds team. And Additive Minds team consists of applied engineering, consulting, and training department. And altogether, we're delivering projects that help customers to utilize the technology to the full potential. And also, additive manufacturing is an innovative technology, and we are continuously encouraging our customers to use it to succeed, to be more competitive with additive manufacturing as Industry 4.0 technology. But we don't do only this to them. We also continuously assess our processes and rethink how we can innovate in every area, including education. So my role is to work on development, support delivery, and development of the digital training products. And also, I'm very excited to be part of this panel and share our thoughts together with such a wonderful team.
Thank you so much, Maryna. Dawn, let's have you go again.
How does it sound
I
now?
think your sound's all good. You're perfect.
Oh my gosh. Yay, nothing like talking about tech and then sounding like you don't know what you're talking about. So Toolbox, I don't know how much you all heard, but I'll do the short version. Toolbox Creative is a branding firm that works primarily with technology companies. So we started 20 years ago. We do a lot of branding work and you know, lots of websites, lots of logos, lots of positioning. And my personal mission really is just to advance women in technology. That's been our focus for the last decade or so. So with all my spare time, I sit on a couple of different boards and work with a couple of different organizations that are working hard to promote women in technology, and culture is a big part of that. So thanks for giving me another go at introducing myself.
I love this panel. Okay, so to get it all started off, the word culture is thrown around so much in today's world. I'd like to start off by centering and aligning and ask you all, like, what to you defines culture? What does it mean to you? Dawn, you wanna get started?
Still sounding okay? Feedbacks? Okay, good. So for us, not only for my company, but for the clients we work with, that culture piece really comes down to people. And I'd say for us, it's, you know, walking the walk. You can't just say you're going to do something without effort into it. So that's where, like for us, when we kind of we're a 50-50 owned company. My husband and I own it 50-50. And that focus on, hey, we really want to help advance women. And that's where I put my time when we're not working within the company, is a piece of it. But it also came down to, we're a small boutique agency, right? So when we started talking about culture within our group, it really came back to the people. They used to call me the mama bear, right? It's like if clients were not being nice to one of my employees, that's when I would step in. And that's a big piece of it, is just always knowing that we're really going to do our best to not only build a culture, but really build a structure and a strategy of how we're going to do that moving forward.
Yeah, I'd like to add to what you just said. It's based on the people, right? So it's built by people, and it's in my understanding, it's a culture is an environment that is created by shared people's values, attitudes, and practices that promote them to excel within organization.
Yeah, I think I'll add a few words. I think the funny thing about culture is, especially when we talk about manufacturing and technology companies that most of us are from, you can't see it. You can't touch it. You can't put it in inventory, right? You can't sell it. But the reality is, it's the number one, it's an asset, right? It's a very important asset, but it also can be a risk to an organization. So as much as it can be an asset, it equally can be a risk if not managed, if not strategized, if not incorporated purposefully into our leaders' thinking. But, kind of by definition, it's defined as the way people operate, right? The way they act, their beliefs. But I always like to remind people that it is the elusive thing, right? That we all know, but it's easy to forget too. I think that's the piece, right? Because it's not sitting in inventory or right in front of us as a piece of technology.
Completely agree with you guys on all points. So what are your guys' thoughts on what affects workplace culture? We've stated that it's invisible. It's something that's there. It can be a risk, but what really affects workplace culture for the positive and for the negative as well?
I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and start with a couple of things. I mean, policies, right? Sometimes we don't think about it, but policies can affect your culture, right? Sometimes you can say there's certain organizations that are very structured, and if that's purposely towards the culture you aim to achieve, then that's okay. But you have to kind of sometimes watch where if your policies create a culture that you have unintended consequences. We sometimes don't think about that. I think the mission of an organization and what you stand for, again, and how what you aim to achieve as your vision can affect your culture. One of the ones I think that we all think of is communication, how we talk with one another, how we communicate with one another. And then the last one that I think is certainly, and there's many others that the other panelists will talk about, but the physical location of where we're at, right, starts to affect culture. If you're around people, the way your environment is physically or now remotely has effects. And so I think the last couple of years have really played in interesting ways on the culture, in some ways that leaders weren't really ready to manage, and what those effects were, again, maybe as unintended consequences.
I'll add to that. I think that piece of adjusting your culture to the times too, right? So we've been around for 20 years. We're in a town that's known for microbrews, right? Happy hour was a common occurrence with our crew. And even in COVID, right, when we all moved home almost 2 years ago, we had a once a month Thursday afternoon club, and one of our staff members doesn't drink, right? He's been a non-drinker for 8 years. So we really had to shift our culture to stop making it like, oh, let's all grab a cocktail and talk on Thursday afternoon, to be super aware of that was alienating him, right? So we made a conscious effort to make that happen. And that structure too, right? Like, even though we've been around for 20 years, we didn't have a parental leave policy at first, right? So 4 years ago, when our first staff member had a baby, it was like, I don't know, what do you want to do? So now we keep refining that. And that's been the most important part for us, really. It's just like, what are we going to do forward? What are the expectations? And thank goodness, because we're small, our folks will roll with us. And we try to really make it open to, like, ask. Like, don't ever be afraid to ask for something, because 9 times out of 10, we're gonna say yes to that. So that's been a big piece of it for us too.
Yes, I also agree, and just small thing to add. It's also formed by values, and around the values, a lot of people are united, especially if the people have diverse backgrounds. Like our organization headquarters are located in Kreilin in Germany, and we have location also in APAC, in different parts of North America and South America. So we have to work as a global team, diverse team, but then everybody needs to be in synergy. So by having common values and goals, this keeps our culture all together.
There's also something to be said about the individual opportunities. If you think about employee, they're not always going to stay at your company. They may leave in 1, 2, 3 years, but you do want to leave them with something that they've learned while working from you. And so it's something that's come to mind for me is how do I create those opportunities for individuals as well within the company, not just for our benefit, but for theirs as well, so they take away something. So I'm curious, and Jeannine, this question is for you because it's a big part of your focus. How do you see the connection between like training and professional development and culture? And kind of like, this is a really big question to impact, but like, what is the state that you see it in today versus like, where do you want to see it growing towards?
I take that, as I mentioned earlier, we get the opportunity to work inside of thousands of companies, right? All different size, all different cultures, all different objectives, different regions, as you said, Dawn, that have sometimes, right, the location, even where you live, right, has a different culture, more maybe rural or downtown. But to answer your question, it kind of falls into that idea of talent, right? There was a study years ago, some of my colleagues teased me, that Deloitte did, that it was actually across the world looking at the number one, what are some of the variables that drive competitiveness for a country? And the number one indicator of a country's competitiveness was access to talent, which is people, right? It wasn't trade, it wasn't fiscal, it wasn't taxes, it wasn't policies in a country. It was actually the people and the access to talent. And yet, if we look around our employers and we ask, how many of you have talent strategies? How many of you really look at it? Like back to that earlier, it's not on your balance sheet, right? Those people don't show up per se on the balance sheet. However, it really ties to culture, as you said, and that idea that even our young people, when they come into an organization, especially now, younger people kind of do expect a little bit of that investment in them. It's just, and that's a good thing, because sometimes I say the younger people might want it, but some of us people who are a little bit more tenured like it too. So it's not a bad thing for anyone that sometimes those younger generations are pushing us to change and evolve our organization, our talent strategies, our recruitment strategies, and thus our culture. But there's a very significant correlation between culture, retention, certainly the attraction, but the retention. I'll just pull it up because I'm looking. It's in a study in 2020, and this was among hourly workers, but it had like 30,000 people who responded, and 48%, and this is pre-COVID, it was right before COVID, were actively looking for a job, 48%. And another 28% were considering another job opportunity. And really it goes at what you asked, is sometimes when we find out, well, why are you looking? Is they don't feel like someone's investing in them, right? So this idea of showing someone how they can get from where they're at to the next job, showing that you're investing in them, even as you said, it means they might leave, right? But as I like to say to people, is your goal to have them not trained and stay with you, right? So, I mean, you want to invest in your people, not only for your own organization, but as you said, for the retention, they feel like there's an investment in them. And we've seen studies that have shown, right, and we've seen it inside of our own organizations. You invest in people, you show them career pathways, show them that there's a way for them to stay within the organization, and they are more likely to stay, which affects the culture of your organization.
And even if they did stay, they left with a great impression of your organization, and everybody has friends in this world, has friends working in similar industries. It kind of all goes twofold and comes back around, right?
Yeah, ties to, as Dawn said, your brand, right?
Yeah. So I guess this question is for all of you. What are ways that you've implemented or observed how culture can affect workplace for the better? Like, Dawn, you were talking about the Thursdays and how you had to make a shift to not, intentionally exclude anyone. What have you guys seen?
We've done a couple things. I love self-improvement, right? Like I'm the self-help book junkie at our office, and I like to bring that into the office. I also believe in hiring great coaches and great consultants. And several years ago, we do our Monday morning production meetings, right? And it was like, so you had a great weekend, everybody's relaxed, and then 9 o'clock Monday morning, it's like, oh my God, what are we going to get done this week? So we had a great advice as to really kind of shift it from here's what's happening this week, here are all our deadlines, to hey, how was your weekend? And then to sweeten that pot, we started another exercise. Some of you have probably heard of like the rosebud thorn. So every Monday morning when we're having our production meeting, we actually extended it an hour so we have time to catch up. But we talk about what were your, the rosebud thorn are what were your highlight from last week. What the bud, of course, is what's on the horizon. What are you most hopeful about? And then thorn is like, what wasn't so great about last week? What sucked? And I think that really changed things for us because you got to come up with one for each one of those, right? So by the time I'm a week past what we got done last week, I've forgotten what half of my staff has done and how awesome it was, right? So that gives me an opportunity to acknowledge that. And we do it every single Monday now. That's just become part of our culture. And it's really shifted things from that being a, oh my gosh, slog meeting to like, hey, everybody knows what's going on with everybody's life. And it's been really a game changer for us. So that's one of the things I've loved most into our addition in the last few years.
I love that. We do something similar as well here every Monday, and it just forces this I don't know, this engagement, right? That if we didn't require that you list at least one highlight, low light, no one would talk about it. We forget.
Right. Yep.
I'll refer to one. I was thinking, that we see, and I think a lot of us on the phone or others that maybe are listening in, inside of organizations, one of the things we often see is when they're trying to implement lean or continuous improvement or operational excellence, sometimes the employees can feel, again, back to kind of culture, how do we feel, how do we act, that it's a form of getting rid of their job, right? You're trying to eliminate my job, you're eliminating waste. And those companies that do it well really do focus on the people aspects, understand that the human side of lean is about bringing people forward with ideas. There's no risk in failure, right? It's kind of that idea of stretch yourself, put things out there, but truly, and I think you might have said it, Dawn, like walk the talk, right? So if you truly believe it, allow people to take some risks and bring those ideas forward. Those organizations that really instill that and believe it tend to, as you said, Christina, have kind of a stronger cultural aspect, and it's built into kind of how their DNA of how they operate. And so they find new things and they bring forward ideas. They challenge their manager on maybe what's happening within the manufacturing process. And manufacturing is prime for that kind of environment of, continuous improvement, new ways of doing things. And so it's such an important part, but it's one that I think we sometimes more mechanically get into the Kaizen events or the Kanban cards or the Andon cords and the elements and the tools, but we kind of forget the human aspect of all those things, which really is the key differentiator. We like to say, when I get the opportunity to say, is like everyone can buy the same machine. We can buy the same materials that go in the machine, the same tooling. But if you stand, maybe I'll say Christina and I behind it, which one has, right, maybe the right feels safe in their environment with their leadership and their colleagues, but also has been educated and trained, right, with that investment back into me. Christina and Jeannine may operate differently and have different performance, but the machine and the equipment and all the capital stuff that you find on your balance sheet were equal in those two companies. And the people will be your true competitive differentiator when you really treat talent as a competitive differentiator in your strategy.
So the $1 million question that's probably on all of our minds is how has COVID changed all of this? I mean, in a workplace, like I'm still in the office. We do print things, so we can't necessarily go home, and we social distance as much as we can. Um, we have those water cooler spontaneous moments, which are really invaluable to those smaller moments of just connecting with your coworkers, connecting with your direct reports in not so much formal ways. Like how do you recreate that in COVID? How do you do that?
Maybe I can get started on this one. Definitely COVID impacted the culture, especially at the beginning, right when in March 2020 in our organization, everybody was sent home, and now we had to start working remotely. It impacted for the larger portion of organization. We have 2 offices. One is in Austin area, Texas area, and another one is in Detroit area in Novi, Michigan. So those offices were impacted, while we also have like across the country remote workers that were working remotely before. So for them, it was not so much of the change. However, from the offices, mostly everybody transitioned to work remotely. We did have a core and still have core team of the people who are supporting and coming to the office. The people who can work remotely, we try to minimize impact of coming to the office. So that definitely affected, especially from the start of COVID. And then I was thinking, how do we still maintain, right, those small chat conversations, small, like you mentioned, Christina, water cooler moments. And at the beginning, now, before we had our meetings at the conferences, now we have those, like now we have on the remote using the platforms, software platforms. So before, like while everybody is joining the call, we can talk to the people who are already on the call. And if we see the dog or see the kid running around, we can learn more about them. So it's different way to connect and different way to learn about what's in the world of our employees, what are their concerns, and understand better how we can work together, how we can support each other to perform better as a team, as an organization.
I can add to that too. We do the Thursday afternoon clubs, but another thing we do is Toolbox Talks. And sometimes it's informational about business stuff. So somebody learned a new tool or figured something out. We use Slack a ton now at Toolbox as well. And that even, we've got a whole just chat, send pictures of your dogs and grandkids and cats channel. But the other one is a monthly, somebody from our staff or one of our partners, sometimes it's a contractor that we work with, will do a presentation, and it can be about whatever the person wants. So one of our guys is super into hip hop music, right? And I'm like, oh, I have no idea what's going on there. It's, big surprise. So he did a whole presentation on hip hop, and it was so enlightening and super cool. Another one of our bookkeeper breeds Australian Shepherds. So she brings the puppies in when she has a new litter of puppies, right? And so it's fun because we do this nice combination of, hey, it might be business related, but more often than not, it's something that you're just really into in your outside life. And especially as designers, right? Like that so informs how we do great work, that's been a lot of fun. And even people who hate presenting, right? Like we give them the tools, we give them the time during the work day to put their presentation together, because it's like, this is low key, right? This is just us. So doesn't matter, you might have a miscue. We really want to hear what you have to say. And we've been doing that for a while now, and we really love it. It's a great part of our culture.
I think the only thing I would add to that, I think those are all really good. And the piece that we're seeing too, and I think all of us can associate with this, is that everybody kind of went remote, right? And there's an element that affected culture, and I'll call it more in our personal lives, right? There was this element that now my work associated with some flexibility, maybe that I was at home, right, in my house, right? And that you didn't have before if you traditionally went to the office. And so organizations are also struggling with not only those aspects that Darn and Maryna went through is, but also how do you assimilate people back into the office without them feeling a takeaway? Again, when we talk about people feeling connected to their organization, it doesn't transcend just, it transcends into our personal lives, right? So I know there's a lot of organizations, and imagine in the HR world, right? Lots of studies, and any HR friends on the phone know there's a lot of conversations around that. But also then how do, when we come back, because as you just talked, we kind of now interact differently. And that's the big thing, Christina, as you said, it's like, how do you build a culture sometimes like this? But at the same time, when we come back into the office, lots of discussions, I'm sure, as you know, the people who are responsible for designing office spaces are like, there go the walls, there goes this, teaming environments, right? Because the one thing that's hard is when you're in group meetings, calls are sometimes difficult. One-on-one, it's maybe not hard for, one of us to get on a phone, you get on the video, you do your call, you still feel pretty connected. I think the group meetings and that type of cultural environment is a little bit more challenged using the tools. But yet I think there's seeing that there's probably going to be a shift in how we go back physically when it's a little bit more the way it used to be, quote unquote. So that's, I think, an aspect that we're trying to figure out inside of a lot of organizations as you kind of bridge the world that had less remote, but now more. And how do you keep teaming the same way as it used to be without trying to go back the way it used to be? So it's just, I don't know that we figured it all out yet, but I think there's lots of good practices and new good things that have come from it, just different ways of using technology to leverage interactions.
Yeah, and I also recalled one more thing. I also had a brief discussion about our culture, how we were able to adapt with my colleagues from HR team. And they mentioned that we are not really remote. Now we are hybrid. So there is 2 days a week when we can come to the office and fulfill for the need to have all those water cooler moments, say hi to everybody who is there in person, but still, like, of course, considering COVID, wearing mask if possible. And so there is that opportunity, right? If somebody really misses those moments, those 2 days are for them there, and they can still come and associate and have that part of the culture as well.
Well, and we had one staff member who said, I need routine, right? And that was part of it. So we still have our routine. We were going back hybrid 2 days a week. And then we decided we needed to actually remodel our office because we didn't have spaces where people could go over and be by themselves. And my husband and I work about 12 feet apart. So when you're trying to do a Zoom call with 2 people 12 feet apart, you can't do it because there's too much overlap and everything, right? So we actually had to do a remodel so we could all be back in the space and have private spaces. But I was so struck by that. Like, I like the routine. Some people wanted flexibility. Like, we had one guy who had small kids. So for us, it was like, man, as long as you get your work done, doesn't matter to us. But then other ones are like, nope, I need routine and I want to do it that way. So that's where we actually hired an HR consultant because we had so many new ways of working thrown at us. It was like, okay, we got to be on top of this. And that's been a lifesaver for us as well.
And yeah. I thought of one. So sorry, I was going to add, you asked early on, Christina, about the things that affect culture, right? We talked about location being one of them and policies I mentioned. So again, when we shifted mostly remote or even hybrid, how does our policy respond, right? Does it respond that we trust that people are going to work, right? And they're going to figure things out? Does our policy turn into a tracking system to see that I'm keying things in every minute, right? That all affects culture. And I'm not here to say good or bad if anyone's doing that, but it does, right? It sends a message to when we think about how policy affects what kind of culture you want and what you're aiming to, what messages you're sending. Sometimes, like I mentioned, sometimes we send messages intrinsically and sometimes very abrupt, or overtly. So I think that kind of ties, and we're in this space where a lot of us don't know. We didn't have policies, but as we're trying to get used, as you said, a hybrid or whatever that looks like, what we do going forward and how we situate our norms around, call it the new normal, is a critical part of culture at this point. And a lot of us haven't probably totally figured that out because we think we're still in flux, so.
Yeah. And
These are, go for
just a small thing. Yes, also in new normal, it became easier to establish connection with our colleagues overseas, like in Germany or in Singapore, because now we are more skilled in using these social technical platforms. We are better, easier to turn on camera, more comfortable communicating, exchanging information. While like before COVID times, to better establish this communication, this meant to travel to their location. Nowadays, we can exchange information efficiently, even through the remote ways of communication. So that's maybe another positive out of all this COVID change.
Love it. Love it. You guys all have great points. We do only have about 10 minutes left, so I'd like to move on to some of the top questions that came in during the conversation. There's some really, really good ones here. We're not going to have time for them all, but we will try. First question is, how do you address disability accommodations? And this is often a diverse group that gets forgotten.
I can tell you from a branding perspective, it's actually something that we bring up a lot with our clients. Our office had to be built to be ADA compliant, and I wouldn't have even thought about that when we built this little office in Fort Collins, Colorado. But when we're doing a lot of, either HR work or culture work with our clients, you'd be surprised how few images of people, who are otherwise abled are even thought about being included, right? So what I've done for me, it's really like, it's knowing that and calling it out when you don't see it, right? It's just being aware of it. And I think that's a big piece of it for us, is that it's just become part of our MO and it's on our radar. So we really try to ask those questions and point it out and make sure that from a visual standpoint, that's included. And it's not always easy, right? Like sometimes you got to go work really hard to find those images of people who aren't your typical, stock people. But it's worth the investment every single time.
I don't have a direct answer for that question, but it kind of ties to something we've been, I think everyone, knows we've been talking about a skills gap in manufacturing, right? And then you kind of overlay that with the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion. And we know we need more women in manufacturing. We know there's lots of different populations that are going underutilized. But in addition, there's a group we worked with out of California. It's a wonderful program called the Uniquely Abled, and it took highly autistic individuals into a machining program and actually taught them, trained them on machining to get them placed in jobs. It's a wonderful program. It's called Uniquely Abled, if you're not familiar with it. And they're doing a great job. But exactly to the person's question, one of the things we talked about, so it's really good that we're trying to call it different, populations of people to engage, into an organization. But like Dawn said, then making sure that your culture and your environment is also set for those, whatever those might be, right? And I'm using that as just an example because I think the question about the disabled falls into that, so making sure that your culture and your norms and things in your imagery, everything is kind of thought through, not just maybe recruiting, but also thinking through the whole experience that someone has as they become part of the fabric of your organization.
Next question. How does HR change to attract and keep a more diverse workforce? Like what needs to be done differently than what's been done in the past when the workforce was largely male oriented and white cis male as well? This is a tough one. I think we've got a lot.
Couple of things we've done. We've actually worked with a couple of different clients who do this specifically. One in particular is DEI, and she's got an app for it. And we've learned so much from her, because one of the things that we learned early on is take names off of resumes, right? Like when you can't see gender, it's really powerful to hire people for their skills. We also, though, it's important that people have some resume training. So it's, with designers, we can tell instantly if it's a male or a female with their resume because they're designed beautifully. And it tends to be, so that's even a piece of it, is we've hired consultants to look at that and strip it down to bare bones so we can first see what qualifies people. And I've done that more so on some of the boards that I serve when we've hired staff members. And it's been a really powerful way to look at, okay, what do we do from a gender? It gets a little more tricky. It depends on where you are in the country, right? Christina, you and I were talking earlier. I'm in the middle of Colorado, not the most diverse place on the planet. But we still, we make an effort to make sure that we're inclusive in language. That's another big piece of that. When you're posting a job description, there's a lot of language out there that women might not react to in a way that a male staff member would. So we really rely on that HR person to make it as gender neutral as possible and kind of take some of that language out of those job descriptions that might have somebody just not apply because they feel like they're either not qualified or that they don't fit. But at the same time, we put a lot of our personality in our personal job descriptions, right? It's like, you got to fit, right? Like we say right in our job description, this is a dog-friendly office. So if you don't like dogs, let us know. But sometimes there's 2 or 3 dogs at the office on any given day, right? So we kind of try to instill some of that in there as well.
Yeah. Which kind of leads me to my next question. A next question in the Q&A. Do you, well, no, sorry, it doesn't. But the next question, and probably the last question that we have time for today, is do you guys have examples of practical ways to change a straight white male dominated culture and teach people how to interact to build an equitable environment? Especially because this is something that not many are, I mean, it hasn't been a topic of discussion, and all of a sudden it is, and it should be. It should have been for a while. But how does that, how do you do that?
Maybe I can share the example, how do I do whenever I would go to the universities and share my expertise about industrial 3D printing with students. If I always, there is in the audience male and female students, both. And I treat everybody equally. I encourage, I look at women to make sure that they are raising their hand to ask questions. I look at male part of the audience and try to answer the questions. And I encourage everybody equally to apply for our internships. Myself, being an example of a women engineer, gives them more confidence if somebody from women was at some age, at some point ever discouraged from becoming engineer, right? It gives them more confidence to pursue that opportunity. So.
I think one aspect is certainly, and again, Dawn, using your walk the talk, right? Leadership needs to look diversified too. And it's, so I think it's important for an organization to start with this leadership. I'm lucky to work for an organization that's probably about 50-50. But I think that's an important element is having that. And I think that the elements that Dawn said too, which is about in your recruiting, everything you're doing, so I won't repeat what she said. And then the other aspect of, I've brought up policies, but I think when you think of your benefits and what you're offering, is revisiting that and certainly knowing that there's many men who are also the primary caretakers of their children, but many women, it's right now proportionately is more women who, especially if you think about maternity leaves and things like that, for a woman, flexibility in scheduling might be their number one benefit, right? So recognizing that and accommodating that and not having that look like you're making a special arrangement, right? But just having it become, again, back to your culture and how you just operate so that people don't feel that they're kind of breaking the rules if they left at 3:30, but in the office, right? But they came in early, right? It should just become where that's okay, that's normal, right? Because other people who maybe don't have children like the schedule because they're just morning people. So again, back to often when you feel like you're making this for women or making this for young millennials, typically there's lots of people that don't, fall into that same camp that you thought you were accommodating or making a certain benefit for that benefit themselves, right? So all boats rise, so to speak.
Yeah, I love, that's such a powerful piece of it for us too. But one of my things, my go-to, because we work with engineers all day, every day, right? So science and stats really do work. So we, last year, I think at this time, right around TIPE, we just filled our Instagram feed with stats on women in technology, right? And it's like, it's pretty hard to argue with those numbers when you see them, right? And I think that's been a lot, and it's never meant to come off like we absolutely need our male allies and we need men to support us to make this all happen. But when you can put some real tactical numbers out there that show how few women's startups get funded, but how much more, that's a really powerful way to get people to start understanding it. And I think now there's 41 CEOs in the Fortune 500 or in the Forbes 500, right? Like 41 women. Like that's still crazy. There should be 251 women CEOs. But those numbers, they've moved, but they're not moving as fast as they should. So awareness is half the effort for us, and that's where we put a lot of our time and energy as well.
I love that. There were so many points here that I want to point out. Jeannine, what you said about like having the policies, it kind of backs up the more casual conversations that are happening every day.
Yeah.
And that is powerful. That tells a powerful story in a workplace. But I'm afraid we are out of time. Hi, Sarah.
Yeah.
I want to thank you all for being a part of this. I had a lovely discussion, a lovely time prepping everything, and I'm honored to share the stage with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all so much for your insights, your experiences, and taking the time to join TIPE 3D printing today. Please feel free to drop contact information in the chat. And everyone joining us, we will be taking a break now for about 45 minutes for networking. We invite you to join us on the main stage now and hope to see you there for some casual conversations. We will be resuming presentations in 55 minutes because math is fun. Check out your TIPE schedule. Please join us. We look forward to welcoming you back on the people track. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.